I just,
It was here?
going back and forth.
That was just the initial, like,
But I didn't. It's okay. I know.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
I won't say I haven't been, but I have a good,
call the meeting to order, please.
image of it.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're trying to call the meeting to order. So thank you and welcome everybody to the May 26th workshop or town hall meeting of the Temple Terrace City Council. Nice to see so many people out here this evening. Some of you are off in the distance, but we know there's people out there. So thank you for being here. I do want to remind everybody that this issue is a work in progress. If you were at or watched the city council meeting from a week ago, we got a presentation on the whole water treatment process and the rehabilitation necessary to the plant to include PFAS removal and water softening. There were some very good questions raised at that meeting, both by council members and by members of the public. Tonight's presentation will be somewhat different based on those questions, and I would expect tonight that the answer to those questions may drive us to yet more questions, both from the council and from yourselves. But we do want to engage the public through this process as much as possible. So although the information may change, I think it's important for you to have your questions answered and be able to provide input throughout this process. So this is a very large project, as you know, one of the most significant in city history and one that will affect the future of the city for the next 40 or 50 years. So it's very important that we get this right.
Having trouble hearing.
Can't hear. Well, I can't.
So they're working on it currently. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I will move this a little closer, and are you guys able to turn this up a little bit? They're working on it. Okay. So thank you for letting me know. And as far as the run of show, how the meeting will go, I'm going to turn it over to our executive assistant, Ms. Barlow, and she will explain. It's very much like the last town hall meeting, but it's been a while, so Jeannie will run us through it.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeannie Barlow. Welcome to our town hall meeting. It's nice to see you all here tonight. We're going to follow the same format, pretty much, that we followed last August at that town hall meeting. So I will just review the format with you so we're all understanding how this is going to work. So this evening, everyone who wishes to address the panel will have an opportunity to do so. We ask that you please complete a request to speak form over at our welcome desk and just put it in the basket. And we will collect the forms in the order they are received. The first round of speakers will be from the forms that are submitted prior to the start of the meeting. Those wishing to address the panel will be announced in groups of 5. When your name is called, please come sit in our on-deck seating, and then you will be given up to 3 minutes to address the panel. So the first person who sits here will be the first to get up to speak into the microphone. Please state your name and city of residence so we have it for the record. Like I said, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. You'll have a green light that you can see up there on the podium. And when you have 20 seconds left, the light will turn yellow, and then it will turn red when your 3 minutes is up, and it will beep annoyingly. When the first round of speakers has concluded, we will announce a brief recess to allow time to collect a second round of requests to speak forms. This process will continue until no further forms are received. This evening, we are also having Zoom attendees. So individuals attending the town hall meeting via Zoom who wish to provide comments or ask questions will also have an opportunity to do so. Zoom participants must use the raise hand feature to indicate their desire to speak. Speakers will be recognized in the order in which requests are received, alternating with in-person speakers as appropriate. When your name is called, you will be unmuted and invited to speak. Please clearly state your name and city of residence for the record before providing comments or asking questions. Each speaker will be provided up to 3 minutes to speak. Once you have finished, your microphone will be muted and the next speaker will be recognized. So when I call your name, the first 5 speakers, please just come sit in the chairs that have the reserved signs. You may address the panel, but the questions or concerns will not be answered until all 5 people have had a chance to speak. So I think that is it. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, then we'll begin. Our city manager, Carlos Bahia, will start off with a recap of what's happened to date, and then we will move on to the presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeannie. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Can't hear me. Okay. We're still working on the microphone. Check. Testing, testing, testing. Testing? All right. That sounds like I got louder. Can you folks hear me in the back? Okay, I'm getting some nods, maybe a little bit louder. Right? Okay. Testing. Ready better? I can hear myself now, so that's probably a good sign, too. Just give me the high side, Brian. Okay. All right. Good evening again, everybody. So as Jeannie mentioned, I would like to start tonight because there may be some new faces here that didn't come to last year's town hall. We also have, as she mentioned, people on Zoom who may not be as familiar with this issue. So I want to just do a little bit of a summary. It's only going to take a few minutes to provide some context for tonight. So on the screens behind me, oh, actually, right there, and on the 2 screens. Am I standing in the way? I am. So
You need the microphone.
I do need the microphone. Hang on. Sorry, this is we counted on not moving around as much. All right, can you still hear me? Okay. All right. So I don't want to stand in front of the screen. Okay, so we're going to hear a lot about water issues, obviously, today. About the water treatment plant. We have 2 water treatment plants. We're going to hear about some of the improvements that are being proposed for the plants. But you're also going to hear a lot about PFAS. And you may be very familiar with PFAS, but some folks may not be as familiar. So PFAS, for all of us, is just a family of chemical compounds that were introduced in the 1940s in this country by certain chemical manufacturers, well-known names, 3M, DuPont, for example. And these, at the time, these chemical compounds were seen as game changers in terms of sort of that suburban quality of life, right? Created things like nonstick cookware, carpets that were resistant to stains. You had now fast food containers that you could have, they wouldn't leak through the grease, dental floss, firefighting foams, contact lenses, cosmetics, all these products eventually ended up having forms of PFAS in them. And everything seemed to be going fine until the 1960s, these companies learned that their products, in fact, were not breaking down. So once they were made and manufactured, they stayed in the environment. So you now find PFAS in soil and air and water, in animals, and even in people. In fact, there's a study that was done that says 99% of the world probably has, if you did a blood sample, you probably would have PFAS somewhere in your bloodstream. So the EPA, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, which is the U.S. government's arm to regulate the environment and its many factors, regulates drinking water in this country. So every 5 years, the EPA goes out and issues something called an unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, okay? Which is pretty much exactly what it says, is they take a look at something that may not be, in fact, regulated today, but they need to learn about it to see if it does need a rule in the future. So every 5 years, they do this, and they test for different things, and they ask us to test all public drinking water systems across the country, of which there are thousands. So back in 2013 to 2015, the EPA issued what's called UCMR 3. The 3 is just the number. It says it's the 3rd of one of these 5-year testing rounds that they've mandated. And in 2013, under this particular round, was the first time that the EPA requested that utilities test for PFAS. And at the time, they said the testing should be a minimum reporting level of 20 parts per trillion for PFOA and 40 parts per trillion for PFOS. So not to confuse people, we've talked about PFAS, PFAS. PFAS, we're going to use that as the umbrella term. And PFOA and PFOS are sort of compounds in that family of PFAS. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about tonight, because those are the ones that eventually are going to be regulated. But back in 2013 to 15, they said, please test your water and see if it meets the minimum of 20 parts per trillion or 40 parts per trillion for PFOS in terms of reporting. Terrace, we tested our water back then, and we found that it came on as non-detect, which meant that we did not meet the minimum. So we were below the 20 parts per trillion and 40 parts per trillion. So the EPA took that information from that round of testing, and they issued an advisory. And the advisory was a recommendation. It was not a regulation at the time. And it recommended that drinking water systems aim to have levels of PFOA and PFOS at under 70 parts per trillion combined. Okay, so that was the recommendation. And that recommendation basically was in place for about a decade. And then you fast forward to 2023 to 2025, and the EPA issues another round called UCMR-5. There was a UCMR-4. I don't mention it here because UCMR-4 did not have to do with PFAS. They wanted to test for other things. So UCMR-5 was the next time the federal government said, test for PFAS. So all public drinking water systems were required to do this again. But this time, because of the science and the data that they've been gathering over the last 10 years, they set a different standard. The parameters were now, we want you to test against a benchmark of 4 parts per trillion, okay, as a maximum contaminant level, 4 parts per trillion. So remember, for 10 years, 70 parts per trillion combined was sort of the recommendation, and it changed to 4 parts per trillion. So we tested, and we found our results, which are listed here on the screen, as ranging for PFOA, we range from about 7.7 to 10, and for PFOS, about 16.4 to 19.5. And we were not alone. We were not alone. In fact, nearly 10,000 public drinking water systems in the country, as a result of these 2 rounds of testing, came to find that they had PFAS in their water. And it's estimated right now that about 200 million Americans are served with water systems that have PFAS. And the EPA actually estimates that nearly 6,700 drinking water systems have PFAS at levels higher than at 4 parts per trillion, and we are one of those 6,700. This slide I presented last year as well. It has been updated. This is, in case you would like to check this out, this is the Environmental Working Group slide. It's a nonprofit that is a watchdog for this issue. And they have updated this slide with new data this year. So you can see what you're seeing here are actually, so you can see drinking water, the light blue are drinking water utilities, so public water utilities that are above the 4 parts per trillion that the EPA is now looking at, okay? That's the light blue, so you can see the vast majority of the country right now is in light blue. If you look at the state of Florida, it's almost the entirety of the state of Florida. So the EPA now took this information from those 2 rounds back in 2013 and now in 2023, and they said, you know, we feel comfortable, I'm speaking for them here, but they felt comfortable issuing what's going to be now an enforceable rule dealing with PFAS. And so they've suggested that there be a maximum contaminant level as a regulation for 6 PFAS compounds, I should say, in drinking water. That was in April of 2024. In May of 2025, they actually repealed a portion of that mandate, and they went down to 2 compounds from 6. So now they said, we're simply going to regulate PFOS and PFOA. And then the EPA set a date for systems like ours and the other 6,700 to be in compliance, and that date was 2029. What the EPA has discovered, and if you go to their web page, you'll actually see the language, which is they realize that there's a lot of drinking water systems in the same situation as us that are working to make this improvement. And so because of that, they've backed off that 2029 date and now have provided an option for a conditional extension to the year 2031. So what are we doing here locally in the city? So in 2025, last year, we commissioned a water treatment plant master plan. So our water treatment plant, we have 2. We have one at Whiteway, not too far from here actually, and we have one in Sunnydale. And those 2 plants have components that are between 30, 40, and 50 years old. So the plants themselves have been around for a long time. They've done great work for the city, but now they're nearing end of life. And so because of that, for the last several years, we have been talking with City Council in our meetings about how we need to do a master plan to determine a capital improvement program for the next several years to improve the plant so that we can get another several decades in terms of service. This past year, obviously, we also got the UCMR-5 test results, the PFAS results I showed on a couple of slides back. We also established a water questions page as we were going through this and learning more about this and getting questions to the public. So there's a button, if you go to the city's website at templeterrace.gov, on the landing page at the very top, there's a button that says water questions. If you click on that button, it'll take you to an archive. Lots of tabs in the archive with materials, with reports, with test results, everything that we try to learn about PFAS we put there for the public. So feel free to refer to that at any point. We've also joined national legal action against 3M and DuPont. As I mentioned, these were the companies that were responsible for this contamination. Public drinking water systems don't add PFAS to the water. This is something that happens because of the actions of those companies. And then we also commissioned CHA, the firm that was doing our water master plan, to accelerate PFAS remediation. So last August, we issued them a contract to make sure that they move towards PFAS, incorporating that as at the forefront of the master plan. And we had a town hall last August. This year, just as the mayor mentioned last week, CHA presented its initial findings on the water treatment master plan to the city council. We also had a firm called Stantec. Stantec is represented here by Mr. Napoli, who'll be up shortly. And Stantec is a rate consultancy firm. And we hired them as well to look at the rates, because these improvements, as we've been mentioning all along, both the water master plan and even the PFAS improvements, there's significant investments in the city. And so it's not something necessarily that we can pay with cash on reserve. It's something that we'll need to look at other funding streams for. Now, we're going to be exploring things like appropriations, grants, things like that. But we also have to calculate what if we needed to issue debt. And so what Mr. Napoli will talk about is what the impact that might have on ratepayers. And so he'll go through those slides shortly. And obviously, we're having our second town hall here today. Next steps. So as the mayor mentioned, this is still a work in progress. We've got a lot of good information that was presented last week, a lot of good questions. We're expecting more questions here today. The consultants are taking notes, and if there are things that we take us in a different direction, we're going to explore all the possible directions that make sense to refine the plan. As I mentioned, we're exploring other alternatives as well for funding. I just don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that all these other alternatives will fund 100% of the plant. It'd be great if they did. It is still very likely that even if we got grants or appropriations, we would still need some funding from revenue bonds. We are going to be working on the budget over the next few months, the next couple of weeks, actually, I should say, and into the summer. And so we'll be having budget workshops for the city's general fund as well as utilities, which would include water, on July 6th and July 28th. So we'll be talking about what's happening in the first year of this plan, potentially, depending on where we go in terms of how we refine it. I'm sure we will have additional council discussions. We may even have another council workshop and discussions at a regular council meeting about next steps also. And any new information that we get, we'll post on the city's website, again, in that water questions page. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'm going to bring up Mr. Talton from CHA.
Excuse me, Mayor and Council, I would like to invite you to sit in the front row on the reserved seating so you don't have to strain to see the screen.
It's an honor to be here with you tonight. I was here last August, and it's good to see you guys again. A master plan really charts the course for what your water treatment plants and your supply looks like going into the future 40 years, and it's something not to be taken lightly. And I really feel good, having been at the council meeting, that your elected officials and even you, by being here yourselves, are engaged in that process to help move forward. Our agenda tonight is we're going to go through a quick master plan presentation, because the really big thing we want to get to is your questions. So we'll go quickly. We also want to address the questions that came up in the council presentation as well. We've got some good answers to those. Moving forward, and tonight we're really focused on the good news. You know, just like mine, water rates are going to go up. But here is the good news. You see this picture here? The city has really good and amazing water supply. It does have hardness, and it does have PFAS, but so does a lot of other Florida groundwaters. In fact, most of them do. Your water plants have served your community well. for 40 years. And so they're nearing the end of their life, and now is a great time to renew them. There is a proven technology that's out there that is available to treat the hardness and the PFAS in one step. And also it can comply with future challenges that may come along, like pharmaceuticals or microplastics or things like that. And we also have some good news tucked in the back, is that there are interim treatment steps available to reduce PFAS quickly. The objectives of the master plan were to identify what is needed to keep your 2 water plants going for the next 40 years. We want to improve the product delivery while continuing to meet state and federal regulations, and we need to meet the new EPA PFAS rules as well, as the city manager explained. We call it a water treatment plant renewal plan, and we want that plan to be cost effective and minimize the impacts to your rates going forward. And we're going to provide some capital and operating cost estimates so that the city can budget for those and through rates and consulting in that. Just a quick background on the master plan. The city did hire us in 2025. We scoped and both water plants and your supplies, and our mission was to provide the utility a framework for needed water supply and treatment improvements and budgeting. Just a quick note on our company, CHA. We are located across the eastern seaboard. Our Florida office has been functioning for over 25 years, and advanced water treatment is what we do. So we're excited to help you move these water plants forward. A quick synopsis of the master plan itself. We had 3 major conclusions, and those conclusions are: your water plants are at the end of their lives. You do need softening to reduce the hardness and PFAS reduction, and treating the residual from these processes that remove that PFAS is going to be complex. And we have a couple good solutions, but you can see at the bottom there was a process that we followed to accomplish this mission. We're going to start off with conclusion number 1. The plants have served you well. Their White Way itself is 40 years old. It would take $30 million just to fix up the plant as it is. So that's a normal life, just like your car or any other piece of equipment. It needs to be renewed. They have fixed lives, and the renewal is a natural process. Same with Sunningdale, 30 plus years. And we think that the conversion of Sunningdale to a booster station will help us consolidate the treatment in White Way, or whatever the decision is. And that will be beneficial and cost effective to have that treatment consolidated. Conclusion number 2 is PFAS. We tested your water, we pilot tested your water, we tested all your wells. We've got a good idea of the levels in them, and they do exceed regulatory limits. But if you look at a picture of the state of Florida, as the city manager showed, most utilities are facing the same thing. My utility is facing the same issue. Hardness, the water is hard here, and we've got goals to reduce that hardness and provide a more palatable product. There's future contaminants on the horizon, other disinfection byproducts, pharmaceuticals, as I mentioned, and the city would like the capability of the new process to be able to remove these future things as well. We don't want to be short-sighted and address only what's in front of us. We want to look beyond, because we do need the plants to last another 40 years. Your existing softening process is lime softening, and while it works and does remove the hardness, there's a more efficient technology out there called nanofiltration, and that's called membrane softening. It's also very similar to reverse osmosis. It's the same process. The membrane is a little bit looser, but the key is the nanofiltration membrane will not only remove the hardness, but also the PFAS. So in one single process, we're able to remove both our contaminants. And with lime softening, the existing process, we would need that for hardness and then need another PFAS removal process. So those multi-contaminants led us to the decision, as well as costs, that nanofiltration was the correct choice for the long term of Temple Terrace. We did consider other alternatives. Expand the well supply at Whiteway. We would need district approval on this, and we also have some test wells that are located within the city that could be sampled as well to get a better profile of if deeper wells would provide some benefit. Purchase water from neighboring systems. This is a valid alternative, and it's the potential to connect to nearby Hillsborough County and City of Tampa. Also, renew and upgrade your existing plant, your Whiteway plant, and convert Sunningdale to a booster station. So those are the alternatives that we looked at, and there was variations of those, but we turned over a lot of stones. When we look at the supply well comparison, when we consolidate the treatment to Whiteway, we need a little bit more water supply at Whiteway. So there's a couple ways to accomplish that, and we discussed that on last week. But one would be a new well. One would be converting bringing the wells over from Sunningdale. And we also have a potentially another option that it would be more cost effective based on some of the feedback we got. So we did some digging, and we've got another option that may be a little more beneficial. So you see that cost go from high to moderate to low moderate. We'd like to come up with a solution that's low moderate, but as we move forward from the master plan into more detailed evaluations, that will be flushed out. We have to have a conversation with the Water Management District. We have to do some groundwater modeling. Connecting to the neighboring utilities, this does have salient benefits. You would not have to worry about treating the water yourselves. You would have regional supply redundancy. You would need no on-site PFAS infrastructure. That would happen at the City of Tampa or Hillsborough County, and you would have lower capital cost. The key considerations of that would be a large urban transmission main that would be needed to get to those utilities to you. We would need to modify our system here to accept that water and change the way water moves through your system with boosting and transmission, and the wholesale water dependency with no control over compliance. So that's just a fact when you connect to other utilities. That is just something you have to live with. The chloramine conversion. One of the things when I showed that picture right up front, I don't know if you know this, but you're one of the only systems in this area that can use free chlorine because of the low organic carbon within your water. Other water supplies like the Hillsborough River and Hillsborough County groundwaters have higher organic carbon, so they need to use chloramines to disinfect the water. So this would involve switching from our free chlorine disinfectant to a chloramine disinfectant. And we would have very little control over purchase cost escalations going forward. Everybody faces those, and we would experience nitrification in the distribution system, and you would lose your water permit, and likely irrigation would also be more costly in the city. A little just cost numbers. The city staff did get a high and a low range from the neighboring utility as to what it would cost to connect up to those utilities, and we're looking at something from a capital cost standpoint, and that's what you would pay up front, from $40 to $69 million, and annual cost of $6.5 to $8.4 million, mostly via the wholesale rates, and that would convert to what we call an equivalent annual cost per 1,000 gallon of $5.75 to $8.24 per 1,000 gallon. And on the right side is the recommended nanofiltration plan for the city, and that is the $72.3 million to get the deep well, and some of the supply wells and components and the plants back up to speed. We would be facing $2.5 million a year annually, and an equivalent annual cost of 4.76 kilogallon. These numbers are for you to consider. This is really your master plan. You're drinking this water, right? And you should have the choice to decide. I think what the council brought up an excellent point is that we need to put these numbers in front of you and let you make the decision. So that's our job. Conclusion number 3 is when you remove the PFAS from the water, you have to do something with it, right? So with PFAS, it's all about concentrating it. So you get a smaller stream, and then you can move to disposal or destruction. And these destruction technologies are rapidly evolving. We were on a teleconference with a technology today. They don't have any full-scale plants, but it's a very promising, and there's a similar technology that does have full-scale plant. But several were investigated, and more will be evaluated going forward. A master plan is flying at a higher level. Now's the time to dive deeper, get more detail, and flush out some of those technologies that may work for the city. Deep well injection, while no one wants to inject PFAS into the deep well of the aquifer, there's ways to remove it before you get to that, but it's a very common practice for in Florida and elsewhere for reverse osmosis and nanofiltration water treatment plants. Typically, they come up with, they remove salt from the water, and they come up with a brine, and that brine is considered an industrial waste. In our case, it would probably be in the industrial waste category too because of the PFAS. So from that standpoint, on the map on the left shows you reverse osmosis and nanofiltration plant locations in Florida, right? And the map on the right shows you deep well locations in the state of Florida. And if you overlay them, you can see that just about, I'm not going to give statistics, but deep injection wells are very common for reverse osmosis and nanofiltration. It's a proven technology. It's used time and time again across the state, as you can see. So we look at some of the concentrate management alternatives comparison, and the top row is one of those evolving technologies that concentrates the PFAS with foam fractionation and then destroys it with a technology called electrooxidation. Now, there is a litany of destruction methods right now. You can do a sound, supercritical oxidation, electrooxidation. So there's multiple ways of doing it, but not a lot are commercially available yet. And so we are looking at those, and as the city goes forward, those may evolve into a more, let's say, implementable and tried and true technology. Now, on the bottom here, you see the deep injection well. And the reason I show it on the top, too, is you can actually destroy the PFAS before you go into the deep well as well. So if you don't want to deep well PFAS, you could destroy it before you went to the deep well. This top line is not included in the plan right now, just because it's not a proven technology, and as those evolve going forward, those decisions will be made by the council and the staff, as to what that looks like, given the engineering, the more detailed engineering. So just want to give you a look at that, and you can see the capital costs on the column there and the equivalent annual costs. I just want to point out that if you could even discharge this to the sewer, which is probably not likely, a sewer discharge would be less cost effective than deep welling. It would be more expensive. So just want to point that out. The master plan estimated the capital costs, and the way it broke down was we wanted to identify priority repairs that we could do quickly at Whiteway. We call it an exploratory well, but it really is more supply well at Whiteway. We have electrical modifications that need to move forward and get ready for the new process, as well as rehab old electrical equipment. And then we call the general water treatment plant process, that's the repair and replacement that would occur at the plant, like on the tanks and pumps and things like that, as well as the nanofiltration, the membrane softening, and the PFAS removal. And finally, these costs do include the concentrate management, and you see the totals at the bottom. One of the questions that came out in was cost escalation from the last council meeting. Typically, and this can be done either way, but the master plan provides the cost in a given year dollar, in this case $25, and that includes equipment purchase, equipment installation, contractor costs, general conditions, overhead profits, survey engineering, and 25% contingency. The cost inflation is handled by the rate consultant's modeling. And that's done on purpose because the rate consultant then can model different scenarios of inflation, and they don't have to take the inflation out of our numbers. So it's a perfect match. Whenever I do master plans or we do master plans, coupling it with a rate consultant is great because they can handle the financial modeling that's needed to fully assess those impacts that will drive costs up in the future. Going forward, this is your White Way treatment plant site, and so there's more good news here as well. There's certain buildings and facilities we can reuse to reduce the cost of this, and we have included that in the $72 million. So we're going to reuse equipment as much as we can. We do plan to put a new pipeline through the plant so that we get some redundancy. There's a single 16-inch pipe running through the plant, and we're adding a second parallel pipe to get redundancy in 2 trains through the plant. So that'll give you, redundancy and peace of mind should one of those trains need service. This shows a schedule that, of completing this plant by 2031 and possibly sooner. So those are the steps needed to make that happen. I do want to bring a bonus conclusion here, and this was brought up by a gentleman at the council meeting as well, and also the council themselves, is that short-term solutions, and there are. My company has worked with granular activated carbon for the last 15 to 20 years. We saw this coming, and we have deployed it in the I-4 corridor in multiple instances, and so it's a proven technology. We actually did pilot this technology, but we found that the operating costs were too high or were higher than nanofiltration, and it didn't remove softening. So that's what took us to the kill 2 birds with 1 stone. However, on a short-term basis, you could deploy these readily at your plants, and we're estimating a 3 to 6 months to get those hooked up and operating, and at a cost that would be somewhere in the $3 million per year range, so for 4 years. And that would get your PFAS out of the water and get you to the 2031 deadline and accomplish something on the way. These tanks can be repurposed for the treatment process itself, so we could use them as a nanofiltration bypass or concentrate polishing as well. So it's not like, there's a lease option, but if you're using these tanks for more than 2 years, you're just better off purchasing them. And the primary cost is also the media replacement. The tanks themselves are they're a cost, but they're not the full cost. We also looked at fast tracking the nanofiltration, and that's a little bit more complex. And that would take on the order of 12 months, and we still have the concentrate puzzle to work out. So that's something that we looked into and could be accomplished as well. But we think the plan A would be more readily implementable. Just a quick, you guys were big on pros and cons, and we love those too. So a little look at pros and cons for short-term solutions. And looking at the pros of the granular activated carbon, we would have both plants complying with PFAS within 3 to 6 months. We already pilot tested the exact media we would use. And so it would be very minimal permitting. Permitting would be required, but that would accelerate the process. Sunningdale could stay operating with some tanks until 2031 or beyond if needed to provide some redundancy. So a couple of these vessels out at Sunningdale would provide a good solution. On the cons, the media changeouts and disposal are frequent and costly, and it has no softening capability. We might need pumping modifications. We think we can pull off the GAC, but not the ion exchange, so we're going to, as we go forward, we would need to look at the plant pumping. And you can see the 4-year total costs for both plants are on the order of $12 million. And if you compare that to the future operating costs of a nanofiltration plant, it's somewhat similar. So the nano plant costs about $2 million to operate per year. You're just jumping into that O&M cost now and getting treatment before the nanofiltration is up and running. So it does have some benefits from that standpoint. The Fast Track Nano, I'll be quick. You would have PFAS and harness compliance probably in 9 months to a year. It matches the long-term solution, but our concentrate disposal is 3 years off. It takes 3 years to develop a deep well and get that hooked up. And as I mentioned, even if you could put it to the sewer system, that would be $2 million a year just itself to discharge it to the sewer, plus probably some capital expenditure as well. From that standpoint, you can see the costs are higher on the nanofiltration. Looking at the Plan A, what you see is a valve tree that connects those vessels together. And while the units themselves would be on site in 4 to 6 weeks, it would probably take us 3 to 6 months to get those hooked up, and probably take a month or two to get the requisition done and the purchasing and all that and the funding and all that. So while I've got there's manufacturers we know, and we had quotes back in August, but we have updated those quotes, and they could deliver vessels in that short a time, given they were paid and things like that. And then we'd need to hook them up. All right. So then that would be a good solution to bridge the gap between now and the 2031. But that is entirely up to you, because it is $12 million. And as I mentioned, it's comparable to future operating costs. Lastly, I don't have great news on the funding, other than the city is working diligently, and we do have some really good leads that we're working on. But we do believe that funding is key to this project, and there is some available, and we're turning over every stone to get that those grants, those lower interest rates loans, and things like that, to reduce the impacts on your rates. With that, I'd like to conclude my part of the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Peter Napoli, Stantec Consulting. Thank you for having me here tonight. Our team is based in Tampa, Florida, and primarily what we do is we help local utilities throughout the state of Florida with long-term financial planning, funding big infrastructure projects, and also providing the continual funding for operations. So the goal of our study here was to incorporate Mr. Tauten's work when it came to the cost estimates involved with the water treatment renewal plan, work with city staff to understand the existing budget for the water and sewer utility in the city, the proposed capital improvements in the plan outside of the renewal plan, and package that all together and help the city understand what the long-term funding needs are for the future. So a little background, what we like to call this a revenue sufficiency analysis, because really what we're looking at is the revenue that the water and sewer rates currently provide, and whether or not that's sufficient to meet all of the targets and goals while funding these massive projects, the debt service related to those projects, and then paying cash for other things that are important to the city's utility. So we incorporate the revenues and expenses in your current budget. We project them over a 10-year period. Currently, just to give you some context and an idea, the current water and sewer average bill for customers in the city is about $75 a month. That's based on 4,000 gallons. That's not the entire utility bill. There's other things that are likely on your utility bill, like solid waste and trash. This is just for water and sewer, and we're going to use that number to kind of give you an idea of how these rate increases could impact your monthly bills. So capital and borrowing is a very important part and component of the equation in this study. Currently, the water and sewer utility has no outstanding debt or revenue bonds, like the bonds that we're considering using to fund the water treatment renewal plan. And so the intention at this point is to issue those bonds to fund that treatment renewal plan and the costs that Mr. Taunton just explained. There is a lot up in the air right now, and he alluded to that at the end of his presentation, with some alternative financing sources, potentially grants, potentially some lower interest rate options for the city. But at this point, we're not aware of any of those, and we can't confidently say the city can acquire any of those. So for purposes of my presentation, we're just assuming traditional debt financing with market interest rates, et cetera. I'm also joined by Mr. Jake Glover here with PFN. He's the financial advisor for the city. So if there's any questions that are more in depth on the financing and the debt funding, he can definitely answer those questions, and he'd be happy to provide that information. Finally, one more thing I wanted to highlight, the cost requirements, the rising O&M costs. So that's important to explain because outside and beyond this water treatment renewal plan, that's very important to the city, the O&M costs, the operating costs of operating a utility go up every year. So salaries and benefits for the employees go up, the cost of chemicals and fuel and supplies, repair and maintenance, all those things increase just like our own grocery bills increase. So that's incorporated into this plan and also puts pressure on the rates. Funding the new debt service is a very important part, and we'll get more into that, but also continuing the funding of the renewal and replacement projects. So beyond the operating cost increases, the utility has renewal and replacement projects on, whether it's transmission lines around the city, the sewer, side of operations has needs from a capital standpoint too. Those are incorporated into the analysis as well. So this one more slide just to highlight the assumptions, and then we'll get into the results, and I'll give you guys an explanation of how we get there. But we start with the fiscal year 2026 budgeted revenues and expenses. That's published online. It's public. It's the utility fund, so all of their operations expenses, all of the revenues in the current year. We use that as the basis, and then we layer in these cost increases based on our industry knowledge and our work with utilities around the state, so increasing the things like salaries and benefits, fuel, chemicals, supplies. The average overall O&M increase on an annual basis that's worked into our 10-year model is about 4.2%. We've also worked with Mr. Taunton and his firm to incorporate the operating cost, and this is the net operating cost impact of this new treatment renewal plan. So that wouldn't occur until 2030. That's when we have it layered into the model, and the net operating cost impact is estimated at around $1.3 million at this time. So that is another pressure on the annual recurring operating budget. There's about $1.5 million set aside for annual R&R CIP. So that's treating all the other types of capital projects around the city for the utility. And then these two orange sections here are important. These are the two operating metrics that we build this 10-year plan by. So the utility should and has a minimum fund balance target of 25% of its annual expenses. Think of this as the savings account for the water and sewer utility, for liquidity purposes, for working capital purposes, but also for bond rating purposes. The rating agencies will look to see if there's a certain level of savings in the account on an annual basis. So that's one rule that we incorporate into that forecast. We don't want the cash reserves to go below that amount in any of the given years. But also the coverage target is important. So a coverage target is the net income, meaning your utilities revenues minus their operating revenues minus the operating expenses, that net income over your debt service obligation. So 1.5 times means whatever your total debt service amount is, your net income is 1.5 times that amount. That's a key performance metric for rating agencies. They look to that to see if the utility can afford to pay its debt service on an ongoing basis and remain sustainable over a long-term period. So 1.5 is the coverage target. There are typically a minimum is about 1.2, and then if the net income ratio is below that, the utility would have trouble even issuing debt to fund a project like this. So the capital cost estimate and timing. This works into Mr. Taunton's presentation of the cost. He referred to the cost being in 2025 dollars for his purposes. So for the purposes of our model, we had to incorporate inflation because as we all know, the cost of anything goes up year over year and has been going up a lot. We have the timing, and this is all preliminary at this point, of the spending for this project and the related spending for this project. So the 5-year total is about $72.5 million that the city has to spend on these different components of the project, but the actual timing of that spending occurs over the course of this table here. The 2025 dollars, so the first year we had to escalate it just to get it to 2026 dollars. So what I did was I incorporated the US CPI water and sewer maintenance series. That's essentially an index that tracks the cost of water and sewer related costs. That's actually been about 5.1% since last March. So that was the first year of escalation, just to get all of the dollars up to that level. Then I incorporated a 3% escalation afterwards. That's where the 10-15 year average is closer to. So after incorporating that inflation, which is cumulative over the course of that period, the total estimated costs we have at $83.4 million. Mr. Talton had $88 million in his presentation. Initially, we had 5% across the board for the 5-year period, and then I took another look at it. I looked at the 15-year, the 10-year averages. There is expectation that inflation will not just continue to be at these elevated levels forever. So it's a degree of savings for the city. Now it's estimated at about $83.4 million. Okay, so this is the results screen. This is a snapshot from our financial model, and I know it's a lot to look at, but I'm going to break it down as best I can. I assure you that everything on here was important, so we had to put it all on here, but it can be a little overwhelming. At the very top of the screen, highlighted in that orange box, that's the water and sewer rate plan. So every year the City Council gets together to decide on what the rate increase would be for the water and sewer rates so that the water and sewer utility generates enough revenue to cover all of its obligations. Just recently in 2026, there was a 5% increase, so you'll see that on the left-hand side of the screen. 10%, 10%, and 10% are currently programmed for 27, 28, and 29 in order to raise the revenues to a level sufficient to meet the debt service coverage requirements and also the fund balance requirements. So the next line below that, you'll see the calculated debt service coverage in any given year. First, actually, let me explain one of the key assumptions behind this scenario. In 2027, we have the utility actually taking out what's called a line of credit instead of issuing the debt all outright. This is a shorter term borrowing where you just pay the interest costs in that year alone, and you fund the very first component of the project. So that's about $8 million, and the cost of interest for that is about $500,000. The reason why that's important is it delayed the pressure on the rates just by 1 year. And then in 2028, we have the traditional bond issuance where you pay off that short-term loan that you took out in 27, and then you get the proceeds for the entire project all at once. At that point, you'll start paying that really high debt service amount, which is the principal and the interest. So it's important to point out that in that first year, we have that line of credit option, so this smooth 10-10-10% rate plan works. If we were just to issue all of the debt in the first year, the traditional way, that debt service payment amount would be then moved forward a year, and the scenario that we were looking at with that, those rate increases were even higher in that first year. So we were trying to smooth out the rate pressure as much as possible for the citizens. After that, those 3 years, you can see those rate increases are scaled down over the remainder of the projection period. The debt service coverage is strong throughout. In 2030, it's 1.36. It's highlighted in yellow. That's the 1 year where there's a little bit of pressure, and that's because those additional operating costs from the treatment plant are coming on in that year. However, it's still within, that healthy margin between the 1.2 and 1.5, and we're confident that, all of our projections are very conservative in nature, so it will likely be healthier than that. The chart below, the left-hand chart, shows the projected savings account for the water and sewer utilities. So those blue bars are the money left over in the bank at the end of each year. That black line represents that 25% target. So if you're below that, you're not meeting your minimum reserve target. And that's a policy from the city, and it's very important for the rating agencies that they see a projected fund balance that meets that target throughout the 10 years. The middle graph just kind of shows how the cash in and cash out, your revenues and expenses, trend over a 10-year period. The operating expenses are shown by the dashed line, the blue dashed line, and then the all-in expenses are shown by that orange line, the difference being operating doesn't include capital and debt service, but the all-in cash out includes both of those amounts. On the right-hand graph, you could see the debt funding, or the capital funding in each year, and the debt funding is highlighted in purple. You could see that, I highlighted that in 2027 the line of credit is used, and then in 2028 the full amount of the project is issued in bonds. On the bottom left-hand side of this page here, we just give you the idea of the debt service amount that the utility has to take on for this project. It's about $5 million of annual debt service. So it's a very significant amount of funding that's needed, and that's why those rate increases are needed up front, to provide that funding and provide for those debt service coverage targets. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, the bottom right-hand side, is just a summary of the overall funding of the project. Our model optimizes if there's any cash reserves available within the utility fund, we're going to apply that towards the project. So we're projecting that the utility could probably put $2 million of its reserves towards the project just to offset the borrowing amount. And then the water trust fund, which is where you're collecting your water impact fees, would provide another $4 million to offset that borrowing. Because every little bit helps to bring down that annual debt service. So this next screen here shows you a rate survey. This includes a lot of utilities in the region. You'll see on the left-hand side of this survey, Temple Terrace, your current average water and sewer bill for residents highlighted there. It's about $75. The average across all the surveyed entities is about that black line, and that's $89. So currently the city's well below the average of these entities that we surveyed. With the first year of 10% increase, which would be about $7 to the average bill, that would move your monthly bill to $82, which is still below that average amount of $89. That's just the first year, the 10% increases. I'm going back to this screen so you could see in the middle of the screen we have the projected residential bill. You see the $74.63 in 2026, that's your current average bill, the $82.27, and then it increases by $8 to $90 in 28, and then another $9 to $99 in 29. What's important to point out about this survey is this is just a snapshot of all these entities, all these cities and counties' rates at this current given time. However, I can say a lot of them are on rate plans. Like I was explaining, even if they don't have a major infrastructure project like the city of Temple Terrace has, they're dealing with just ongoing operational cost increases and inflation on an annual basis, and none of them are able to keep their rates stagnant over a long-term period because many utilities have outstanding debt, so they have coverage policies. They have to maintain certain amounts of fund balance. So that's all just to say that this is a little unfair in that we're just showing Temple Terrace moving up in 1 year, where we're showing all the other utilities in the region keeping the same rates from this year to next year. And this slide here just kind of reinforces my point. So I just grabbed a bunch of snapshots of news articles about cities and towns in the region and around the state that are implementing significant rate increase plans. Like Mr. Taunton was saying, a lot of utilities around the state are dealing with similar PFAS issues and water quality issues, so they're having to make significant infrastructure investments. And in order to make those significant infrastructure investments, federal and state grant money is hard to come by, and often these utilities have to fund it with their own rate revenues. So the only way to do that is to pass rate increases on. And St. Pete has rate increases coming. Apopka has some very significant rate increases. Hernando County, Pasco County. It's very common around the state. So to summarize the findings and considerations of our study, the line of credit is key to providing some relief for the city in that first year. If any of those alternatives come to bear, some grant funding, settlement money, lower interest bonds, all that does is relieve the pressure on the rates. So these 10% might become 9%, might become 8%, depending on what the city can do to fund the project. But currently, under this scenario with the line of credit in 27 and then the traditional bond financing in 28, our recommendation is that 3 years of 10% increases are necessary to provide the adequate funding for debt service coverage and for fund balance. We're concluding that the residential bills continue to be favorable when compared to local bills in the region. And you saw that in the survey, that even in the first year, the city is still below the local average. And we're going to recommend that the city continue to review this annually and incorporate any changes to the assumptions or funding scenarios. And we'll continue to help the city as long as they need us. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer your questions after this.
Thank you, Mr. Napoli. Could we get the lights? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I want to thank everybody that presented, Mr. Talton, Mr. Napoli. We're going to ask if the council would like to come back up to the front table here. And Ms. Barlow, would you like to start the process for questions?
Yes, I will. We'd now like to begin the public comment portion of our meeting. When I call your name, if you would please come sit in one of the 5 chairs, and the person closest to the microphone will speak first. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name. First speaker is Daria Nevan. And we have Emily Myers. Connie Hammond. Fred Sumner. And Charles Loeb. So you can adjust the microphone up and down, and when the 5 of you finish with your public comment, then your questions will be addressed.
Hello, good evening. My name is Daria Navan. I'm a resident of Temple Terrace. So thank you for the presentations tonight. Really great information, really appreciate it. I also wanted to do a quick shout out to the city for the updated water report this year. I thought it was really good, really easy to read, and much improved over the last years. I just have 3 kind of comments / questions. We've been talking about funding strategy and the fact that the city is going for several grants. I just wanted to make sure, and I'm sure that you guys already know this, but the DuPont 3M settlement fund Phase 2, the deadline for submitting is July 1st, about a month ago. So just, in about a month. So just wanted to check that we have submitted our baseline results and that we're going to submit the claim forms, because I think that's going to give us the best chance of getting some actual meaningful funding. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that, again, you're probably aware that EPA issued some proposed rules just last week, May 18th, and there's some interesting nuances to those rules. One of the rules allows cities to apply for a 2-year extension, right, to April 2031. But during that 2-year period, which they call the exemption period, so April 2029 to April 2031, if you have a detection of either PFOS or PFOA at greater than 12, you have to comply with certain requirements. One of which is going to be either, providing filters or a different water supply or point of entry treatment. So I think that the short-term treatment that was discussed is really interesting, and the city, once you look at this rule in detail, you may want to consider doing something like that. Another nuance with this rule is that even though they say that the compliance deadline is April 2031, that is based on a 1-year running average. So we're going to have to sample quarterly, and we have to get to that 4 PPT for PFOS and PFOA by the average by April 2031. So in actuality, we really have to be thinking towards April 2030, because our average of the last 4 quarterly results before 2031 have to be in compliance. So I just wanted to mention that. Sorry, do I have time for one more? Sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Emily Myers. I'm a resident of Temple Terrace. Appreciate you having this tonight. I feel like the presentations are perhaps intentionally commingling two unique issues. One is the level of PFAS in the water. The other is the fact that it appears, at least at surface level, like there's not been a recurring plan in place for ongoing maintenance, renewal, and replacement for our water treatment plants that, as you presented, look like they are at or near the end of their useful life. I'm just a little bit concerned about the fact that it seems like there's not been a plan in place for the water treatment plants previously. It seems like this is a very reactive solution, and had the PFAS issue not forced the conversation, I would be seriously concerned about whether or not our water treatment plants' ongoing maintenance needs would have been addressed. So I'd just like to see more thorough consideration of the potential alternative to connect to the neighboring utilities. I appreciate the thorough financial analysis that Stantec has done on the Temple Terrace option, but if we could see more detail financially on what it would look like to connect to neighboring utilities, I'd appreciate that.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I have a little difficulty with the financial presentation because on the financial presentation, you're taking a capital improvement with the property and distributing that as part of your annual cost. It probably should be separate. And the previous speaker was absolutely on it when she said there should have been a plan all along to be putting money aside for capital improvements or contingency fund. We pay taxes to the county, we pay taxes here, we pay taxes there, and grants and other options didn't appear in your speech other than as a side effect. We need to be exploring them rather than saying the taxpayers are going to cover this in a presentation, because that's basically what we're doing. We're saying we're going to incorporate it in the cost of the monthly fee to the property owners in Hillsborough County. Thank you for listening to me. This has been very traumatic, knowing the cost and all that we're going to be distributing to a very small community compared to communities in the area. Thank you.
Just a reminder to please state your name and city of residence before you speak. Thank you.
Fred Sumner, 502 Broxburn Avenue, 50-year Temple Terrace resident. Got a couple of questions. First of all, $72 million is a lot of money if it actually comes in for $72 million. The 4 parts per trillion is an amazing triumph of technology, and I would be curious to know for 2 things. One is, are there any identified adverse health effects from the PFAS at the current levels? And secondly, if you were able to achieve that level, bear in mind, dose makes the poison. The radionucleotides that are presently in our water from the decay of uranium are not set at 0. So is a little bit worth the $72 million or whatever that ever comes out to be. The third thing is, having read the report, I do not find any kind of breakdown of the $7 million for the well that is in the report. Certainly, that's a lot of money for 1,500, 2,000 foot well. And my last question is, for the water softening, which seems to be a tangent here, how long has our system been out of service, and how much actual difference does that make, other than for this nanofiltration that's being pushed? Thank you.
I don't know if we can turn.
Testing, testing, testing. Is that better? Can everybody hear me? No echo?
Charles Loeb, Terrace Park, and might as well take the testing. Everything okay? Okay. I did want to clarify something I said back at last council meeting, and that is that I was thinking about Telecom Park also, that what happened to your air is criminal too, and that you should be thinking about getting money and dealing with the environment in the air too. After all, we never know what kind of regulations are going to come up in the future. As speaking of the future, I am glad that you did mention about doing future things in about care, that it's very important that you have things that can be put in easily and dealt with easily as possible when future decades and generations come. I do hope the technology will make your plants last even a little longer. An example about what I thought out was like maybe someday that contaminants could be biodegraded. So it is possible that if this can be done easily, that maybe in the future that it will be cheaper in the long run. And I really hope that for decades to come for the young people. Thank you.
Sorry, okay. Now we gotta change the mic. Can everybody hear me in the back now? Okay, thank you for keeping us on task. So I believe So-so. Okay, I'm as close as I'm probably gonna get unless I attached it to myself. I want to thank the people that spoke. The first lady that spoke addressed the issue of the funding strategy, dealing with the deadlines for 3M and DuPont in terms of outside counsel. Our city attorney has been working with outside legal counsel on this matter, so we are aware of the deadlines coming up in terms of, there are basically two tranches of filings, and we are aware of those, and we'll be submitting to meet those deadlines. Also, she mentioned very clearly, and thank you for doing that, about the EPA's changes to the rules last week, which talked about the conditional extension. If you noticed on the slide, we talked about it as a conditional extension. She's absolutely correct. In order to get the extension, not only do you have to apply, but you have to meet certain requirements, which she outlined very, very well, which would mean you'd have to do some interim solutions, whether they be something similar to what was presented by Mr. Talton here tonight, or, for example, she also cited, which is one of the bullet points on the EPA's website, something effective like giving people pictures of Brita filters and things like that. I mean, it runs the gamut. So those are items that EPA is looking at as well. And we understand the issue about the running average, so that's something that I will follow up with the team on relative to the 2030 to 2031 timeframe. Moving on to and I hope I addressed, it seemed more like observations rather than questions, but I hope I succinctly captured those. The next speaker talked about, it looks like we're commingling PFAS with the water maintenance issue or the water plan issue. The commissioning of the study for the water master plan actually happened in early 2025, so that was where we were going initially. The PFAS issue, when we got the test results and we started becoming more aware of those issues, led us to issue a contract in August of last year for PFAS remediation as part of that, and that was what was accelerated as well. So they were separate issues. As Mr. Talton's presented, I think, last week and this week, there are features of the master plan in terms of the systems that they're proposing that actually will address both the master plan and equipment as well as the treatment issue for the water. So they've gotten together. I wouldn't necessarily call it commingling, but they're definitely going hand in hand at this point. Had another question about wanting an observation, wanting us to continue looking at consideration of connecting with neighboring utilities. We are still exploring that. We may need to have some greater direction in terms of perhaps even Board of County Commissioner action, potentially, but we are continuing to explore that. We're trying to refine the numbers. As we mentioned at the outset, this is still somewhat a work in progress. As we learn more, we're trying to refine our math and with Mr. Napoli's help also see what impacts that might have on the rates. So we are still considering that and we'll be working towards that goal if possible. Next speaker talked about a contingency fund, in essence, to like a pay-as-you-go. I believe it would be like, starting to save money. So the lady mentioned taxpayers. I just want to clarify, this is a common misconception. So your water utility is not supported by property tax. Your water utility is supported by ratepayers. So your customers have an account with the water system, and they are the ones that are supporting this. So The city has a practice, at least since I've been here, of hitting a target of having 25% reserves as a contingency for our utility funds. That's industry standard. The council, if they wanted to, I suppose they could say we want to have a larger contingency, we want to save money towards a future project, could be decades in the making. That's not typical practice because, as you can imagine, what will happen is that means that today's ratepayers would be paying for something that may never materialize. So typically what happens is you identify a project or a capital expense, and you get the commensurate rate to support that expense, because the people that are going to be using the capital product are the people that are going to be incurring the cost. So they tend to line up that way. So that's something we could explore, but again, it's not typical practice, and it would have some implications that would probably be a little tough. The next gentleman that came up, you're sitting right in front of me. Unfortunately, it was so muffled. Jeannie, can you help me with the gentleman's questions? Because I had trouble capturing them. I caught two of them at the end. I know he asked about the breakdown of costs concerning the well.
$7 million for deconjection well for water softening. How long has our system been out of service?
Yep.
How much does nanofiltration help?
Okay, so if I could ask Mr. Talton to maybe come up and address those questions.
So I think the first one was the 4 part per trillion health effects, right? Was that the first question? Yeah, and that's the limit. So that is what the EPA judges as safe for humans, less than 4 part per trillion and less, right? So that's what we can judge. So
Are there adverse health effects associated with higher PFAS levels?
that's why it's a regulation. So yes, that's what they found. So that's why they did the research, promulgated the rule, and passed the rule. So yes.
It doesn't actually answer the question. It just told me that the regulation's been promulgated because they can detect it.
Can I go ahead and stab at that? So we are. There are a variety of studies out there that indicate apparently there may be a health concern with PFAS. Obviously, that's why we're having this discussion here. So we're not experts in the field of epidemiology or health that related to this issue. So all that we can say is what everybody else is aware of, that the EPA has recognized this as a health concern and has issued this regulation that 4 parts per trillion would be the new measure. As you recall, when I started out this conversation from 2013 to 2023, it was 70 parts per trillion. So the science and the data has advanced to the point that the EPA feels that 4 parts per trillion is now the appropriate measure.
It just seems that we're being stampeded toward this, and the 2031 will never happen. There are too many water systems in this country that are non-compliance for that.
So I hear you, sir, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I'm trying to be cognizant of everybody else's time as well. You'll have a chance to go back up to the microphone. And then the water softening question, could you address that?
Yeah, I don't have the data in front of me, but the softeners were working up till about a year and a half, 2 years ago, something on that order. And they're an older technology that's not made by a manufacturer anymore, so it's really hard to get parts and things like that. So that's the situation. I think you also said breakdown for the well costs, right?
$7 million.
Yes, and
That's a line item that's not broken down.
right, and the well costs have really increased lately. So, say production wells. So what it is, it's roughly $500,000 design, roughly $5 million construction, and then you've got contingencies and surveying, things like that on top of it. So that's the estimate. However, there is good news. We've been working with the plant itself, and Mr. Doug Hammond right here. We're looking at a better solution than that well, and so to increase the capacity there, but it's going to take some discussions with the Water Management District and permitting and water quality, hydrogeological modeling and things like that to prove that this technique will work. So there's a real good chance that we can significantly reduce that cost.
Great, thank you, Mr. Talton. Next, Mr. Loeb spoke. He mentioned the telecom park issue, and then he also mentioned if the contaminants, as we look through this process, looking at whether any of these contaminants from the well residue could be biodegraded. Not sure if you have an answer to that, or is that a technology we would have to, an area that we still have to explore? You can do it from there if you want, actually.
Okay. You know, that's a big avenue, is that we need to start making things that are biodegradable, right? So it's kind of wild that we make something that is harmful to humans in the 4 part per trillion range. So that's something we should be focusing on as a community and with our elected officials, is to make things that are biodegradable and not harmful to humans.
Thank you, Mr. Talton. Ms. Barlow, next round of speakers.
I only have one more request to speak form. Does anybody else want to speak? Okay, would the following people please come sit in the on-deck chairs? Chris Barquin, Tara McDaniel, and Daria Navan. And when you come up to the microphone, please remember to state your name and city of residence for the record.
Chris Barquin, Temple Terrace. I want to thank you for looking into the interim mitigation methods that I mentioned at the meeting the other night. I may have missed something, but you were talking about GAC and IX for the, looks like that's the preferred method right now, but they also have disposal costs, and I didn't see you mentioning any of those in your presentation. The nanofiltration obviously has a waste stream disposal. My understanding from what I understood you to say is that the problem with that is not necessarily the deep well injection, but the permitting lead time on something like that. My question would be, with the number of deep well injection wells that are around the state of Florida right now, is there any opportunity to accelerate that permitting process, looking at the number of wells that are already in effect in Florida, or in operation in Florida? Second thing is, you build it once and you maintain it forever, whether it's, in this case, it's going to be 40 or 50 years. Looking at their report, you can see that Temple Terrace has not been very rigorous in their maintenance of the existing facilities over the last 40 years. I hope that there's a maintenance program established as part of that report, and that can be built into the budget. It's not the operating budget. Your operating budget is electrical, it's mechanical, it's that sort of thing. It's replacing nanofiltration devices. I'm talking about painting pipelines, restoring valves, exercising valves, that sort of thing. If that's not done on an annual basis, or has part of a regular maintenance program, you're going to be talking about the same exact thing you are right now 20 years from now. Thank you.
Tara McDaniel. My approach is going to be completely different. I want to speak to you from the point of why we should be passionate about doing this. You all realize that you have about a spoon, a plastic spoon in your body from plastics. Now, we do get it from everywhere else, which is stated. However, we can control a lot of that in our homes. Our water should not be something we have to be concerned about, which is the reason I was so passionate about this over a year ago. You ask about health issues. I was a pediatric nurse for 30 years, okay? It will affect immunities, cancers, sensitive issues in little boys and women. Do you realize that I already have passed that down to my daughter, who is 20, through my uterus? You are passing it down through all of that. So the reason I am so passionate about this is because it may not affect me, because I'm 52. However, it's going to affect our generations that are coming down. It can be increased cholesterol, thyroid, liver problems, cancer, lower birth weights, increase of certain cancers because of PFAS. Now, you don't want to use Ziploc bags in your house, you don't have to. Use glass. You don't have to buy clothing that has it. There are items that are going to have plastics in them. The water should not be one of them. So I did show this water report to my son's physicians and to my own physicians. I made no comment. I showed them the water report, and they all said, "Are you drinking this?" I said, "Well, unfortunately, yes. It is affecting your pets. You think you're not getting it in the shower. PFAS are elevated in heat. You're getting it in your pool water. You're getting it at the rec center. You're getting it in your drinking fountains, in your water that you're at establishments in this place, in Temple Terrace." So this is not only something we need to handle now, it's going to affect generations to come, all of the generations. So please get passionate about this. Speak to your neighbors, come to the meetings, make posts, talk about it, learn about it. Netflix, watch Plastic Detox. Then you'll realize why we should be passionate about this as a community and as residents. I appreciate everything they are doing for us. I appreciate all the back and forth that we're having. We need to have all of our items listed of how we're going to handle this. And not only hear us, but also listen. And I know that you are, and I appreciate that. But I want people to realize that the community needs to be passionate about this, because it's affecting not only you, but all the generations ahead.
Hello, Daria Navon, Temple Terrace. Just one last point I wanted to make. Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, this is just building on the last point that I made, which was that we will need to be in compliance by April 2030 effectively. And I think the timeline that we've seen is that we might have something permanent up and running by 2031. So just throwing this out as an idea to the City Council, when you're going to look to procure the design and contractor for this project, just wanted to throw out that you could consider a progressive design build. Because that could really shorten the design and build timeframe, and that it differs from the traditional design bid build model because you bring in a contractor at the outset. And in this case, as we've been talking about, there are thousands of water utilities going through the same thing in the country. And there's a very long lead time on equipment. So if we have a contractor signed up at the beginning, they can start ordering equipment before the design is finalized. And that could save us some significant time. The other advantage is that we can get earlier price certainty. Under the normal model, you get the price once the bids are opened, and then you might get, an unpleasant surprise. Under this model, the contractor is going to give you a price, at the 65% design. And then it also reduces the risk of change orders, and so that also saves you time. So just wanted to throw that out there for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So just to recap, I believe we had one question from Mr. Barkwin about the disposal costs. I believe he's referring to the granulated activated carbon, perhaps for the interim solution? Yes.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about granular activated carbon is that PFAS is destroyed at 2,000 degrees, right, Fahrenheit. So that's what it takes to destroy that stuff. So coincidentally, how they regenerate the granular activated carbon is they throw it in a furnace and they regenerate it at 2,000 degrees. So they get the carbon regenerated and they destroy the PFAS in one fell swoop, and then they bring that regenerated carbon back and reuse it again. So it's kind of a green process. So that is the way it's done. the carbon manufacturer charges a price to to empty your tank out and fill it back up with the activated carbon. And that price might range from $60,000 to $100,000 depending on the size of the tank. So that price includes taking the carbon out and regenerating it at the kiln, which they just built a brand new one in Alabama. So that's a pretty cool process. That price does include the regeneration of the carbon. Now for ion exchange, it's a little different story. It's a similar material, but it cannot be regenerated and it must be landfilled. And so that's why the price for filling up the ion exchange is significantly higher than using the granular activated carbon. So that's the difference in those two. We do agree with the maintenance, building that into the plan, and that is part of the master plan to continue that forward, that proactive asset management. And I think there was a question on accelerating the deep well. And Mr. Doug, do you mind answering that question on accelerating the deep well construction? This is Doug Hammond. He's working on several of those projects right now.
Everybody hear me? Nope. Yeah? Good evening. My name is Doug Hammond. I'm with CHA also. Deep wells, there's a lot of them in the state, but they all take a lot of time to go through the permitting process. The reason it takes time to go through the permitting process is FDP is the agency in charge of that, and FDP is also in charge of protecting water supplies. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of modeling, a lot of checking to make sure your confined layers are in place, because you don't want a waste product to migrate back into the water system. So there's a lot of things that happen. Test wells, monitoring systems, everything that goes in. That's why they're so expensive. You have to put in test wells, monitoring wells, and the deep well itself. And it's in this area, they're about 2,800 feet deep. So through that process, through all the modeling, it takes about a year to a year and a half to do the permitting on a fast track, do permitting and design of the well to get a permit from the district, the water management district, and FDP to be able to install a deep well. Then it takes another year to get all the systems in place, find a contractor, which some people have brought up. There's only a few contractors who can do this, to get contractors in place and to be able to complete a well. So you're looking at a 2 to 3 year process to get a deep well designed, permitted, installed, and made operational. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. I think Ms. McDaniel, were observations. I didn't necessarily hear a question, but thank you for those as well. And thank you as well to the last speaker for the consideration of progressive design build. We have used design build for different projects in the city, so I'm certain that's something we'll be looking at as well. Ms. Barlow, would you like to call the next speakers?
We don't have any more requests to speak forms. Is there anybody who would like to fill out a form and speak? Oh, you need to fill out a form. I'm sorry. Ms. Rodriguez, do we have attendees? Do you want to listen to the virtual questions?
Sure. Somebody could read these questions to us, please.
They're kind of long. So the first one, can the consultant explain to people what their company's role will be?
Ms. Rodriguez, could you speak? Please hold the mic closer.
Oh.
It's hard for us to hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can the consultant explain to people what their company's role will be if the project is approved, and for the duration of the project, and how much they will be paid during the project, if anything? Do you want to read the next one?
Please give me both.
The second one, the two-train approach was discussed in detail both tonight and earlier at the city council meeting. It seems to be a vital piece of the project and seems that it is supposed to improve comfort to the residents that going from 2 plants down to 1 plant is a viable and reliable option. Please ask him to explain in plain language what is meant by a train and why having 2 trains when going down to a single plant should help residents sleep better at night, assuming that that's his position.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yep, no, thank you. So I can address the first question. So right now, the CHA, they have a contract with the city for the PFAS remediation plan and for the master plan. If we go forward with whatever plan that we ultimately, with the city council decides on, we will need to go out and seek a consulting firm to do that. It may end up being CHA. It could also be another consulting firm that be involved in that design and engineering. So at this point, all they're doing right now is the master plan and the PFAS plan. As far as the second question, I'm going to refer to Mr. Talton to address the issue of the 2-train approach.
Okay, a train in a treatment plant is a line of tanks, pipes, etc. So if you have 1 pipe that connects multiple tanks in series, you have 1 train or treatment train, kind of like a train on a train track, right? However, if you create a parallel line of pipes, tanks, and whatever, you get a second train, so that if one of your trains need maintenance or a tank out of service or something like that, you can take one train out of service and still have 1 train functional. Now, the city does have 2 water plants right now, and that does give you some additional redundancy. And our plan is, if the city accepts, is to keep the Sunningdale plant running until the other plant, the new plant, is up and running. So from that standpoint, the Sunningdale plant will keep running in the short term. However, once the big plant has been upgraded and constructed and is operating with its 2 trains, you now have what's called Class 1 redundancy. So that's as good as you can get. Now, yes, maybe it would be great to have 2 plants, and that's something the city will have to assess on the risk. You like to have and minimize the single points of failure. However, look at the city of Tampa. They have 1 plant, right? I mean, they have a giant David L. Tippin 80 million gallon a day plant, right? I mean, right on the Hillsborough River. So that's 1 plant there that serves a bulk of the community. They are interconnected through, Tampa Bay Water and what. So as long as your plant has full redundancy and can operate under emergency conditions with emergency power, with redundant trains, then you're as high a redundancy or lower as risk as you can have, right? So certainly, it would be great to expand the other plant too, but there's not a lot of site. That site is very tiny, and there's some amazing trees there that would have to be taken out if that site was expanded or used. So from that standpoint, there are cost efficiencies with consolidating the plant to 1 site. And that's where your staffing's there. You have less chance of failure. You have higher security, right? You've got a remote plant over there that somebody could break into, things like that. So by consolidating, you do lower your risk from that standpoint as well.
Ms. Barlow, are there any additional speakers? We have the gentleman who is on deck.
Yes, Eric Stinson.
All right, Eric Stinson, Temple Terrace resident, and sorry to keep us here even longer with a question, but I've got 2 questions. One's just a clarification. Maybe I didn't understand correctly. When we were comparing the price of the renewal with connecting to the city of Tampa, it looked like we were comparing the $72 million not including the debt rate, which I think came out to 83 million, assuming that inflation doesn't continue to skyrocket. So I was curious if you could go back over those costs of connecting to the city of Tampa, comparing it to the cost with the rate structure. And then I just had another random question about the deep wells. Can we not use someone else's well for a while for the injection? Can we ship the waste to a different well, and would that lower the cost initially? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else want to speak at this point? Okay, all right. Ed, would you mind trying to address that question, please?
Okay, these are all good questions, thank you. So regarding the debt service on that, I think that's something that Mr. Napoli said that he would address, and we could pull the thread a little bit further, but the City of Tampa option requires a pretty significant capital cost itself, which would also require debt. So they would both have debt service. City of Tampa's connection alternative would have lower debt service. So something that does need to be looked at, and Mr. Napoli, I think, committed to that. Did you want to speak?
Sure. Thing that I think might help with that. Mr. Talton's comparison with those two costs with connecting to the other utility and then investing in the infrastructure for the city, those were both in current day dollars, so that's kind of apples to apples. If you took the current day dollars from connecting to another utility and compared it to the inflated dollars that I provided as part of my presentation, it'd be more of an apples to oranges. So I just wanted to point that out. They were both in 2025 dollars.
And the last question about sharing the deep well, that is a great idea, but there's just none around here. Your staff has done an excellent job coordinating with the City of Tampa. In fact, they came out to visit our pilot study. They have their own $3 million pilot study, but they came out to see ours. So, and there was some talks about coordinating between the two utilities, but I don't think it went too much further. But that's something that may that could also occur. But there's no deep well nearby here. There is one at Clearwater, the City of Clearwater, but that's just too far to go to get there. So.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for their questions. And Mayor Ross, do you have any comments? The rest of the council, any comments?
Well, I'm sure we have some questions in addition to the comments. So let's do questions first, if that's okay. I have questions. I'm assuming you guys do too. So, no questions. Questions? Oh, okay. Councilmember Fernandez?
I have questions.
Okay, you're recognized. I'll come back to you.
Okay, so I don't know if is this close enough? Okay, so my main question is the layout of information. So I'm an accountant and I'm picturing what I would need to compare. And that is, I need to know, I need a column that lists every single aspect of cost for each project. And then I need the 3 potential choices above it. So for example, I need to see, does City of Tampa have capacity, yes or no? I know that that's going to be X's under renew our material or our plant and X under Hillsborough County, but I need absolutely every component of each of these projects laid out in a grid fashion with a dollar amount next to every single component. Because if we're looking at connecting to City of Tampa, for example, we have to know if they have capacity that they would share with us. 2, we have to know if they do not have capacity, but they would be willing to expand their capacity, what would the timeline be on that? We have to know the cost that would be passed along to us to expand their capacity. We have to know the cost to connect. We have to know, so I'm going to ask for that, and in the future, maybe, we can go over like the vision I have of that product. But I do want to know about how important, or if there's another methodology to use, if we were to use the, what is it? I can't think of the name of it. Granular, okay.
Activated charcoal.
Activated charcoal, to take the PFAS out, but it doesn't provide water softening. One, is there a way to add water softening that would be cost-effective to use that versus going all the way to the nanofiltration? And two, what is the reason that I know that people like softened water, it's a better product, but what about providing softened water is necessary? Not just to provide a better product, but is there a component of that that's necessary in equipment maintenance, damaging people's faucets, or like, is there a requirement that we would need to soften the water as beyond just providing a better product? Those two questions, sorry.
Do you want me to address each individually?
Yeah, if you would.
Sure. Okay, thank you, council members. So we will, I understand the question or the direction about the layout of information in terms of how you want it, and I'll actually follow up with you after to make sure we get it straight. We can do that in terms of follow-up presentations to the council. We agree, and we just want to make clear that we still need to close the loop with the other utilities, whether the city of Tampa or Hillsborough County is actually a viable option. So we're still working that to the ground right now, and we will include that if it's pertinent in that same formulation you asked of in terms of the formatting. The next question about whether we use GAC instead, in addition to a water softener, and whether the water softener, would that be more cost effective? And in addition to that, is water softening actually regulatorily required? Not sure if Mr. Warrenfelds or Mr. Talton want to take a stab at that one.
All right, and that was the reason we ran the pilot plant at the Whiteway plant. So we pilot tested both at the site and in a laboratory the function, the performance of the granular activated carbon and ion exchange and a couple other medias in the situation. And what we found was the regeneration rate was a little too frequent to be cost effective long term. From that standpoint. So that guided us toward the nanofiltration. You certainly, in the report, in section 4, there are, we considered all the other viable, currently used in Florida softening methods, including lime softening. The problem with your existing process is it only removes about 30% of the hardness, and that just wasn't, that wouldn't meet our goal. So even if we rehab that, and it only ran part-time. So what we looked at was building a brand new softening plant. And what we found was building a brand new softening plant was the same essentially cost as building a nanofiltration plant. So basically you're getting the PFAS removal for free. Now there's concentrate discharge associated with nanofiltration, so that's not an apples to apples comparison. But that said, is just comparing the two technologies, softening, you're getting the pretty much the highest technology PFAS and future contaminant system available, that we can change the performance of it by just changing out the membranes that are inside these pressure vessels, right? So we can adapt to future conditions, and should a more advanced membrane be created. Certainly we weighed those options, and in the report our cost to build a brand new lime softening plant at the Whiteway. I will tell you this, almost everyone in Florida is moving away from lime softening. There's a few dinosaurs left. Cosme is one. Fort Lauderdale has the 5-ash, but that's going away. So most everyone is moving toward membrane softening because of the advantages, and lime is a let's say it's an onerous material to work with. It's a little bit dangerous, and you also face disposal challenges with that as well. So we did look at those options, and certainly softening is a secondary contaminant, so it's not really regulated. You could put as much hardness as you want out in the system. I think it's from a standpoint of product satisfaction, that we set a goal of reducing the hardness from 300 down to 150. So that was the goal we set, and that goal drives your decision making. Should the council or the residents choose not to soften, that is certainly an option, because there's no regulation that tells you have to soften. So let's see, does that, let me see if I got everything there. Does that answer them all?
Well, mainly I wanted to know what the benefits or what would be the problems if we didn't soften the water. I'm not necessarily advocating that. I'm just asking about what the issues are.
Yes, and I think from a health standpoint, you could have kidney stones. If you don't have a home softener in there or something like that. So there are some health issues that you could be dealing with. And also operating a home softener itself. I worked for Orange County. I looked at complaints in their water system, and about 80% of their complaints were actually related to the home softeners not being operated by the homeowners correctly. So, that's a quality issue that that occurs because of the homeowner's responsibility to soften. So that said, that is a decision that you and the council, the mayors and the citizens would make as far as your water quality goal, and that is not a regulatory requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay? I had a couple of questions. Most of them were answered at the city council meeting, but I'm still fuzzy on the deep well remedy. The deep well, we're going to be producing a ton of affluent from the nanofiltration systems. I just want to make sure that that's adequate. Whatever we end up doing is going to be adequate to handle all that, or we're going to be back here in 5 years with a whole different problem. Then you talked about the carbonate, the granular, the activated charcoal, rejuvenating at 2,000 degrees. But I also thought that there was no process to eliminate the PFAS. Does the PFAS die at 2,000, or does it not? Because if it doesn't, then we're just putting it back in the air, and the next time it rains, it's going to come back down. Okay. There is a concern at the financing portion that we are going to put R&R calculations or make allowances for the future calculations to allow for R&R. This council has done an awful lot to make sure that the infrastructure is maintained. There's councils before us that didn't. And we've tried to right-size the utility rates and the tax rates to accommodate that, but we're making up for a lot of lost time when there were councils before us that didn't have the foresight, if you will, lack of a better way. And it's not a critical comment. It just didn't happen. And I want to make sure that we do keep that into our future forecasts. I think that was it. I do have some other comments, but are you going to get back for comments?
Yeah, let's do questions.
Okay, that's fine. Those are my comments. Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Councilmember Kravitz? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to respond to your questions. Got ahead of myself.
All right. More good questions. On the deep well, we would size it to a size for ultimate capacity needed, and it would be sized to a max day condition that would occur. So that if we could potentially, when the say the nanofiltration treats 6 million gallons a day, the concentrate is a little bit less than 1 million. It's in the 600 to 800,000 gallon a day range, and that's not a huge flow as far as a well is concerned. So we would size it though conservatively, because you're right, we do not want to drill a second one, right? So regarding the PFAS bond, so PFAS is a fluoride molecule attached to a carbon chain. And what the 2000 degree does, as well as sonolysis, sound, electrochemical oxidation, it breaks the bond. And so what you end up with is carbon and fluoride, so two relatively harmless substances. So so the bond is broken at that 2000 degrees completely. And then I will make one more comment, is that, and I've said this at the council meeting, I believe, I think this is a perfect time. If the plants had have been upgraded 5 years ago, right, in the old processes, and we'd put a lot of money into them, we'd be in a difficult situation now that money may not have, we may have to undo some of that money that was done. So from that standpoint, I think it's a perfect time to renew these plants. It is advantageous to you that they have reached the end of their life, and now we can build, new state-of-the-art treatment facilities there.
Councilmember Kravitz, it's your turn for real this time.
So I fully agree with what Allison said. I'd also like to have a complete comparison. And my question goes to that. I'm starting to really be confused by and not believe the numbers that are being presented regarding connection to other utilities. So I'll just give an example. I have numbers in front of me from a while ago to connect to the city of Tampa that were between $20 and $39 million. I had numbers presented to me about connecting to Hillsborough County that were between $25.7 and $35.8 million. That one seemed very specific to me. The 20 to 39, I don't know. But when I get a set of numbers that are 25.7 to 35.8, it makes me think that's someone I really sat down and calculated it and thought about it. And tonight, I saw a slide that said it's between 40 and 69 million to connect. So that's a 50% increase, and I'm wondering whether any of these numbers are credible. And I'd really like to see actual durable numbers come to us. And I raised this point at the last council meeting. We need to go to these utilities and proceed on the process of getting them to give us a number or a no, and then we'll know, and then we can make a decision on that basis. So can anyone explain to me, CHA, city manager, anyone else who'd like to volunteer, where we have these numbers from and why the numbers tonight were $20 to $30 million more all of a sudden?
So we did the best with the numbers we were provided. I think I agree 100% with you that going forward, more detailed analysis is needed. So from a master planning standpoint, we provide class 5 costs, which are plus or minus 50%. We're much better than that, but that is the master planning level of cost. So in order to, I master planned and was the bond engineer for the city of Tampa for maybe 12 years. They have construction contracts with contractors that they get unit construction prices from. So that's a construction price. And for instance, the construction of our project would be $50 million, not $72 and $25. So on top of that, we add contingency, engineering, things like surveying, easement acquisitions, items like that. In the case of the Tampa connection, there's facilities at the city of Tampa at our city that need to be modified. In order to get that water into our system, we're going to have to flow backwards from small pipes to big pipes. So we're probably going to need some transmission improvements. We're going to need some storage and pumping. We're going to need some booster pumping, and et cetera. So for it to be apples to apples, we took their costs and we put a 45%, just like we did our $50 million, to get to our capital costs. So we took the cost from construction costs to capital costs. But I am in 100% agreement with you that going forward from the master plan, more detailed costs are needed. I'm on that page, 1,000%.
I could just have a quick follow-up. So just to clarify for the audience, what you did is you took the top line number of 40 million and you just added 45% to it.
Correct.
Okay.
It's same as we did for our costs. Our 50 million, we added 45%, we got 72 million.
Okay. So again, we need to see what those actual costs are.
Agree.
And So my current state of thinking is, next week I'll probably bring a motion to instruct staff to go out and talk to these two other utilities. And I'll probably also bring a motion to explore having a temporary filtration solution put in the meanwhile, so that we might even move under the regulatory threshold and not have to worry about getting an extension at all. So that's my current state of thinking after hearing what we've heard today. So I'll give up the floor now, and I'm curious what other people have to say.
Vice Mayor, did you come up with anything?
Questions? No.
Yes. No?
Comments? Yes.
Okay.
Not time yet.
Mr. Talton, I have a few questions. I think they're all for you if you want to just come up. Thank you.
I got Doug over here that's ready also, so
Okay,
he's at
well,
the ready.
I just need answers. I don't really need something from whoever.
Yes, sir, I'm kidding.
So during your slideshow, I made a couple notes. When you talked about connecting potentially to another utility, there's a lot of challenges to that, which some of them have to do with cost, some of them have to do with politics, some of them have to, there's a lot of things left to work out concerning that, and we will run that to ground. But one of the things you mentioned is nitrification. In our system, if we were to connect to another system, we would run the potential, or we would get nitrification in our current distribution system. What is that?
Yes, sir. And just so you know, I spent 3 years studying St. Petersburg's, the city of St. Petersburg's distribution system and the nitrification that occurred there. In the late 90s, they converted from free chlorine to chloramines, just like you would need to go to Tampa. Nitrification is when you form chloramines, you're doing it to mask the reaction of organic carbon with the free chlorine so that you can comply with the disinfection byproducts rule from EPA. So when chlorine hits organic carbon, it creates things like trihalomethanes, haloacetic acids that are cancer-causing, that have been proven cancer-causing. So in order to stop that, they combine the free chlorine with ammonia, and they create a chloramine. And chloramines, it's proven it's used in a lot of situations. In fact, some of the future disinfection byproducts may be looking at the combination of nitrogen with chlorine. So that could be coming down the pipe as well. But what happens there is as the chloramines dissociates or decays in the distribution system, it goes from chloramine to chloride and ammonia. So it goes back to its ammonia form. And what loves ammonia is nitrifying bacteria. And so even San Francisco, it's temperature driven. In the summertime, it's a real big trouble to even keep your residuals up. So the nitrifying bacteria use the ammonia as food, and they they persist in your distribution system. To combat that, utilities do something called a free chlorine burn, or now they call it a chlorine maintenance. So they will shock the system with free chlorine, which gives you, the disinfection byproducts for about 2 weeks that we're trying to avoid. And so it's just how they deal with the system, because they have to keep knocking those the bacteria back. So I would suggest you maybe go over to talk to some of the folks at City of St. Petersburg, because it is something that is a real maintenance issue and nightmare. You'll be using 10% more water because you have to flush to keep your residuals up during the summer, and your tanks will lose chlorine residual, and it's just you'll be in a constant battle to keep residual during the summer. So that's just that's just everybody who is on chloramines deals with that, and it's such a blessing that you are not on chloramines. Let's just say that. So if I could, even if the costs were more expensive to not go on chloramines, I would still recommend it for you, because the heartache, the product quality, things like that, although it meets every standard of the book, it'll eat up, because my own city did it as well. It'll eat up your toilet flapper valves much quicker. You'll be replacing those once a year. And so it's just something that you've got to deal with. And you deal with it because you don't want the organic carbon getting converted into a disinfection byproduct.
Okay. For tonight's purposes, I'll leave that alone. But The other thing that was talked about in terms of disposing of the affluent or the byproduct of NF filtration, I guess that's redundant, NF systems, there was a mention of foam fractionation, and it was, I think, presented as an emerging but not yet fully developed technology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, sir.
Does it exist in a lab but not in the real world yet, or?
So foam fractionation actually is a proven technology. It's used to concentrate the PFAS in a given stream. And actually, there's a treatment in water process called dissolved air flotation that really was the predecessor of foam fractionation. So you bubble air through the water, and off comes the greases and things that float to the top. So that's proven, and that's been used in the water industry. What they're doing now is with this foam fractionation is they're concentrating that, and they're using it to take maybe a 500,000 gallon a day stream of concentrate and reduce it to about 10,000 gallons per day so that they can hit it with these expensive destruction technologies. So the destruction technologies are high energy, and you have to break that fluoride bond, and so you want to do it on the smallest flow possible. So PFAS removal is all about concentrating. The membranes concentrated. We're probably going to use a advanced, let's say, a multi-stage so that we can concentrate as much as we can, but then you take that concentrate, you concentrate the PFAS further with the foam fractionation, and then you hit it with the destruction methodology. And I just happened to be talking to like a PhD in foam fractionation today, on the phone. So it is a proven technology, but what's not proven is the combination of that with the destruction technology itself. So we know we can concentrate PFAS, and the next step is to prove that we can destroy it consistently.
Okay, so those two steps put together, that's not yet in use?
There is one that we've looked at that's, there's a 1MGD facility in Cary, North Carolina, and it's on an industrial plant, so it's not municipal yet, but they're advancing, and there's other technologies that are moving to market, and so this next year or two will be really telling as to what really works or not. We spoke with the gentleman today with the technology, and they have trailers that they can come down and pilot test it, right? And we can also give them some water, and they can bench test it up at their facility. So those are the kind of steps that we would take before we would, and that the Department of Health would require if we were using a new technology.
Okay. No, actually, I think my other question was answered by somebody else. So talk to me for a minute about short-term possibility of using the GAC, that's the granulated activated charcoal vessels. There's a cost to that, obviously. $3 million per year, I think, was mentioned. But the byproduct from that, now you talked a little bit about that. So the reason that this technology was not chosen over the NF was because we would have to send so much of the waste somewhere else to be burned.
Right. So typically we would like to replace our carbon maybe a year. We would like to run it through our vessel and replace it once a year, maybe once a 6 months. So in the pilot testing, we were seeing more frequent than 6 months, and so that's one of the reasons we steered away from it on the long-term solution. However, that said, it certainly could be part of the long-term solution as a potential bypass around the nanofiltration that would give us some lower the cost of the nanofiltration if we had those skids already in place, and we could use that to let's call it optimize our treatment process.
So suppose that we acquired these GAC vessels on a temporary basis while we built the permanent solution to help mitigate this in the short term while we build this out. What would we do with the byproduct of that? I mean, how often would we have to, what would we do with that? Because I think the $3 million, I don't think that included the change-out.
It does include the change out,
It
yes, sir.
does, okay.
And what they do, it's a really slick operation. They come and stick a hose in the top of the tank. They pull out the old carbon. They put the new carbon in, right? And off you go. So.
And they take it away.
That's right. And there's multiple viable manufacturers. We usually stick to the some of the better known ones, and we also pilot tested it so we know exactly how much PFAS it removes. And it definitely got the two biggest ones down under the limit, and it also showed decent removal on some of the smaller ones as well.
Okay, I'll let that one go for now too. There was one speaker, seems like she might have left now, that she talked about, and actually I hadn't thought about this until she mentioned it, but it makes sense, that the PFAS levels that we have to comply with by 2031 are actually a snapshot of a certain number of quarters prior to that,
right,
which actually puts us to start the 2031 compliant testing would need to start in spring of 2030.
Right. And that's what makes this technology good. As long as we could get the acquisition, the purchasing, the layouts, the pads, the pumps all set up, the vendors have tanks available, brand new tanks ready to deliver, on a quick basis.
I mean, this is more of a comment, which I'll get to in a second, but I mean, it just begs the question, it's like, we don't have all this time that we think we have.
Right.
Particularly if we're still exploring connecting to other utilities, we're exploring, deep injection wells are gonna take 2 to 3 years out. We just heard we don't have a lot of time to run some of these answers to ground.
Right. We also investigated fast tracking the nano and the delivery on a unit. If we worked hard with them and were rapid in acquisition, we could get a nanofiltration skid in approximately nine months to a year.
Yeah, but we can't get anywhere to put the effluent for 2 to 3 years.
That's the problem. Yes, sir.
So if we started tomorrow, we couldn't drill a deep injection well
Correct.
for 2 to 3 years.
Correct. So we turned over every stone, but it does appear that this stone, which we actually pilot tested at your plant, is something that would work in the short term and cover the compliance that's needed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Council. I have over budget on my questions, I'm sorry. So we'll start with closing comments.
Comments. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight and everybody watching on the YouTube or whatever we're putting it on. Appreciate it. Stay interested and excited about this issue. It's your water. It's our water, so do that. I want to talk a little bit about a comment about Facebook. I don't do a lot of Facebook, that's well known, but I've been looking at a lot of the different Facebook posts and stuff. Please, everybody, our city has done a fantastic job of putting information on its website and keeping the public informed if you look for it, or you could always call and ask. So be very careful watching some Facebook stuff. There's a lot of false information out there. So some of our residents have steered some of those Facebook posts to the right places, so thank you. So just be aware of that. Another one in regards to the cost between our systems renovation and maybe connecting to another utility. It may be indeed cheaper, remember this, it may be cheaper between 72 million or 85, whatever we come up with, or 40 million, 30 million. But the cost per gallon of water may be more, and our residents may indeed pay more per water bill hooking up to the utilities than if we go for our own system. We don't know that yet, but it could be. So it's not just the total cost. You got to look at the monthly bill, which we all pay. And last thing is to find out if City of Tampa and the county to hook up to their systems will meet the deadlines at the same time we could meet it ourselves. So those are some things I'm concerned about in comments. But again, thank you for coming tonight.
Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you, Matt. I also would like to thank everybody for coming out and for the comments. It's a work in progress. We've been working, I know we've been working on it a year, but this has been a problem with the bill for like the last 40 or 50 years. My family, my wife, my kids, my grandchildren, we all drink the same water. don't have any filtration systems that do any different than probably 99% of the other of our fellow residents. I do have a water softener though, and it is fixed. So that's a big deal. That is a very big deal as far as the pipes. Still got a lot of work to do, but I can pledge that this council is going to do everything it can with all due speed and due diligence to make sure that we do the right thing that's right for the city. There's a lot of questions dealing with the interconnectivity of the other systems, the chloramines. I remember a few years ago, probably about 25 or 30 years ago, where all of a sudden people's pipes started rotting out, and I believe they blamed it. The water department blamed it on the change in the purification system, and I believe chloramine was involved with that. So there's a lot of things we need to be careful of. Make sure we do it right the first time. We don't have to come back and do it right away again anytime soon. And if there's one thing that everybody needs to remember, unless I'm mistaken, there was a timeline, albeit rough, 2026 certain stuff, but by 2030, the filtration or the nanofiltration, I think, was in line, would help us get to the 2031 deadline, taking into consideration the quarterly running averages as to where they'd be calculated. So I believe that that's already cranked into the timeline. You may correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think we'll make it. I think it's obviously something we have to do, not just because of the law, but because it's the right thing to do. Thanks.
Councilmember Fernandez.
I also want to thank everyone who has attended the meetings, who has commented and asked questions. It is obviously taking a lot of analysis and consideration. We had a very similar presentation at the council meeting, and we all had questions at that time, but the more you consider the possibilities or solutions, there are obviously more questions. So know that we are going to be looking at every aspect of the potential solutions and comparing them against each other and making sure that we are comparing them as closely as we can. So for example, we're going to, obviously you heard me ask, we're going to be looking at a full, complete listing of every component of each possible solution so that we can know the full cost of the possible solutions, as well as what's going to provide the best value and result to the residents. So at any time, if you have questions, I do have a city council Facebook profile. So if you have questions, you can message me there. I try to go on the various bulletin board sites and see what the questions are, but I can't answer you through my private, like my personal Facebook. It has to be through my city council Facebook profile. But you can always call me. I put my cell phone number out there all the time, and I do answer it in case you're wondering. But I really do want to assure you that while there may not be necessarily a simple cut and dried answer, we are going to analyze all of the information, and we do appreciate your feedback and the questions that you may have. We are going to have a workshop about this because obviously as we go through the analysis there will be more questions, but I do want to say to city staff, I am also very, very interested in the interim solution that we could put in place to provide some relief and some benefit as we're going through the process of deciding ultimately what we'll do. So please, we live here, we raise our children here, we drink the water just like you do, so understand that we are just as interested in the proper solution as you all are. So thank you all for coming, your questions, and your input.
Thank you to everyone who came out. Thank you for spending some of your day with me and with us. And even though I'm up here, I'm also part of the audience. You know, I live here, my wife lives here. Having good, clean water is very important to me personally, as well as professionally in this case. I agree with what Allison just said. She's right about that. We do need to explore the temporary solution. My current state of thinking on it is this. We need to nail down the numbers to connect to the outside utilities, or we need to get a no. If it's a no, we move on. If we have a number, we compare the number to what we have for our own construction plan. So we can do apples to apples on that then, in terms of finance. Beyond that, there's a lot of worry about giving up control of the water. We would still have water infrastructure in Temple Terrace in that scenario, and it's important to remember that parts of Temple Terrace are already served by Tampa Water. Raintree comes to mind. And people who live there have lower rates than we do. So that's also something to consider. Everyone's rates will be going up, that's true. I'm not advocating for one solution or the other right now. What I want is to see the numbers. I want to be able to compare them. I want to have a temporary solution in place so that we don't have to rush like everyone else will be rushing. And that will also bring us into compliance in a way that hopefully we will not have to apply for an extension. I said this at the last council meeting. I will not vote for an extension. We need to get into compliance by the original deadline, and there's no guarantee that the next administration won't just reverse that extension. So there's an election in 2 years, in 2020, we have 2028. So 2028, there's going to be an election. We're going to have a new administration, and the EPA could change its policy, could reverse the extension 3 years ahead of what we're all assuming will be the extension. So we don't know what will happen, but if we have a solution in place that brings us into compliance, it doesn't matter that we're in compliance legally. What's important is that we'll then have good water here. And then this whole debate can be a little bit less aggravated by the fact that the water is not good. And once we have that temporary solution in place, I think a lot of things will become easier. Also rhetorically, because we can all calm down a little bit, but also practically, because everyone will be happy that their water is clean. So if we can add a little bit of additional cost and go in that direction, then I'm all in favor of that right now. That being said, I emailed everyone a little while ago. I got over 40 emails sent to me, so I have a relatively broad spectrum of what people think. I'd invite anyone who wants me to hear what they think to please email me. I will respond to you personally. My cell phone number is also on the internet. You can find it on the City Council website. You can look me up. Call me, email me, get in touch. I'll take your opinion into account, I promise. You'll get a personal response from me. I won't brush you off. And I'm not on social media, so those are the only legitimate ways to contact me. So I think we're on a good course. And I've been asking for these numbers from Tampa and Hillsborough County for a long time now, so I do want to be clear about that. This is not the first time I'm bringing it up. It's probably the 50th time. So at some point, I'm going to have to force the issue, and I'm going to have to make a motion that we go out and get those, and either I'll get the support for it or I won't. But either way, I'm tired of asking and not getting the answer. So that's my current state of thinking on this topic. I give it straight and clear right here. This is what I'm going to do. So I'm happy to hear your opinions if you want to get in touch and persuade me otherwise. And otherwise, I appreciate everyone coming out here and listening to me. So that's all. Thanks very much.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. Thank you for your questions. Actually, some of your questions were very good, and some of your comments actually brought in, helped to refine our questions, and some of your comments I didn't even think about, like the 2031 thing. So thank you for showing up, thank you for being engaged, and thank you for your questions. So the first issue I want to talk about is connection to other utilities. That question deserves to be run to ground, but I think there's a little difference of opinion of what it means to run that to ground. So first of all, if Hillsborough County or Tampa is never going to be able to give you a price as to what it's going to cost to connect to their system, because they're not going to put a pipe in, we are. So if we have to put a pipe in that goes 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, we're going to have to calculate, okay, it's going to be a 16-inch pipe and it's got to go 3 miles and it's got to go under this road, this road, this road, and this road. Well, it's very difficult to get a firm number on that because we tried to, well, we didn't try, we did. We had a gravity sewer pipe that failed under Fowler Avenue across from Raintree. I'm sure you saw it because it was under construction forever, right? And we tried boring under the road. This project started out, it was supposed to be $800,000, I think, is what it wound up with, $3 million or something. Now, we're trying to get some of that money back from FEMA and some of it from contractors, but this was supposed to be like a 30-day, $800,000 fix, and somehow it turned into a year and a half, or over a year anyway, and $3 million. So imagine doing that project, but going 6 miles under 12 different roads or however many different. So that's why that number is nobody's going to be able to say, I'll do it for $8 million and not a penny more. Because God knows what they're going to hit when they start boring under stuff. So that's one thing that we will never probably get a firm, I mean, we'll get some idea. It's not like we won't have any idea. But that number is going to be hard to get at. Now, what they would cost us to actually make the physical connection and that kind of stuff, yeah, we could get that, and we will. That's something that deserves to be answered for the people who are asking that question. It's a good question. I don't know. My hunch is that won't be viable, but we deserve to know the specifics on that, and I'm all in favor of getting that. I'm also in favor of us trying to get some kind of temporary mitigation strategy, and whether that involves the GAC vessels that we've heard about or some kind of nanofiltration skids that we've heard about. That's proving difficult because then you've got to have somewhere to put that, which means you'd have to have the deep injection well, which we've learned we can't get for 2 to 3 years if we started in the morning. So there's a lot of, this is a complex thing. We're going to work through it. Last week's meeting brought about more questions. Tonight's meeting brought about some answers to those questions and just developed more questions. So we will get to this. We will find the right solutions. And there were questions raised, and rightfully so. This is from a layperson's perspective. You're like, well, what the hell has the city been doing for all these years? I mean, how do we find ourselves with this end-of-life water treatment plant? Have we not been doing anything? The answer to that is yes and no. So yes, the city's doing a very good job. You've seen a lot of stormwater projects. You've seen a lot of sewer. It's stuff that, unfortunately, most of it's underground. It's not like we painted the building and all of a sudden you drive by and you're like, oh, they painted the building, right? But we've had infrastructure projects really on high speed for about 5 years now. We've done a lot of work. It is fair now to talk about previous city councils. And I don't want to judge the people that came before us. That's not fair to look at, in hindsight when it's perfect vision and you're like, oh, those guys, if they should have done this, that's not fair. You got to remember that previous city councils were dealt with the recession, then we rolled into this, then we rolled into that. We had periods in the city when they had to raise the millage rate on everybody, which was extremely unpopular, and there's a lot of pressure to reduce the millage rate. They were hesitant to want to raise the water rates because they just raised the millage rates. We also had underpaid employees. We were a training ground for other local governments in the area because our benefits and our pay were so far behind. People would come to work for us to get their foot in the door. We would train them for a year, and they'd go to Tampa, they'd go to Hillsborough County, Pasco County. We don't have that problem anymore. We're paying a good amount. We've reduced your millage rate 3 times in the past 10 years. We won't be able to keep doing that. I assure you there'll come a day when that ball's going to bounce. But we have reduced your millage rate. We have raised your water rate. We've raised your garbage rates in order to get to that 25% that Mr. Napoli was talking about. We did do that. As you can see, no matter what we do, you're probably in store for some more rates on the increases on the water. But I do want to assure you that we will work through this. I appreciate you being here, and I'm talking to the wrong people because you care enough to be here. But I will tell you, it's a gut punch to every person sitting up here that does this for almost nothing and we put ourselves in this position, we put ourselves in this fishbowl, something like this comes along, and everybody on Facebook knows better than all the experts. And they all know with crystal clarity what a bunch of idiots are up there, and it's like they kick you in the gut. And it's like, really? I mean, we didn't put the PFAS in your water. I promise you we didn't do that. And so please work with us towards solutions. We will get there. We will do what Temple Terrace does better than anybody else. And that is we band together, we find solutions, we dive in, and then we go to the 4th of July parade. Right? That's what we do, and we're going to do it with this too. So we need a new water treatment plant, whether there's PFAS or not. These guys are already here doing a study when we found out there was PFAS. In the long arm of history, this is going to sound really weird, but so stay with me. Don't quote me on this, Mr. Cody. Right? On the long arm of history, this may be some weird kind of blessing because we discovered the PFAS before we dumped $30 million into redoing the water treatment plant, which was our plan already. And so we could have put $30 million into this only to have EPA dump this on us 2 years from now and find out you got to put 30 million more in it now because of this thing called PFAS. So we are setting the city, I'm getting long, I'm sorry. We are setting the city up, this council's done a fantastic job. We are setting this city up for the next 40 or 50 years. There's some hard things on the horizon. We're asking you to vote for a public safety complex, right? I know that's expensive, that's a big ask. Nobody up here would ask that of you if we didn't know that that was necessary and strategic for the future of this city. This water treatment system is necessary. Your kids, your grandkids, your kids' grandkids will be drinking water from this water treatment plant, right? This is the price of being a modern city in the world today. We are no longer a little golf course community. We are a real city. We have police accredited, nationally accredited, fire, which is higher accredited than Tampa, Hillsborough. I cringe when people say, oh, we need to do what Tampa's doing. No, listen, Jane Castor is a dear friend of mine. We do not need to do what Tampa's doing because we can do it better. They've got 450,000 people. We've only got 28,000. We can give you better service. They can't. There's just too damn many of them, right? So we're not going to go away. We're not going to join Tampa. We're not going to dissolve. We've been here 100 years. We're Temple Terrace strong. We're going to be here for the next 100 years. So thank you for coming out. Stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be more. So thank you.